And I also believe in it. Like, I actually feel like you will love this necklace if I give it to you. I mean, the one I gave Oprah was so beautiful. And so when you love your product so much, it almost makes it easier because you think their life is better with it.
Building a business is tough and doing it alone even tougher. Welcome to She Talks, your go-to podcast for raw, relatable, and ridiculously useful business advice. I'm Lisa Jones, and I'm both a mum and a serial entrepreneur, and I'm here to help share real stories and proven strategies to help you scale up your business. Let's do this together. If you've ever found yourself wondering, am I building a business that truly reflects who I am? You're going to love this week's guest. Melissa Clayton is the founder of Tiny Tags, a widely loved jewellery brand worn by mums, celebrities, and even Meryl Streep. But more than that, Melissa is a woman who's built her business with heart, integrity, and unwavering commitment to staying in her lane. Melissa shares how she started on the kitchen counter and since landed in 1,600 Target stores. We also talk about growing slowly and intentionally and why not going viral can actually be a good thing. So pop your headphones in, grab a coffee, and take a deep breath because this episode is a beautiful reminder that success doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be yours. So welcome to the podcast today, Melissa. It is such a delight to have you here, and I'm absolutely so excited to break down the Tiny Tag story today. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, I want to throw back to the reason that you started Tiny Tags. Let's go back to the old days, if you like, because you're quite an established brand who's been around for quite a while. And I want to find out, so many of our audience and listeners are women who've started product brands because they're solving their own problems. Perhaps it's also because they want to be creative, or maybe it's to solve a financial or set themselves up financially. Why did you start Tiny Tags?
When I started Tiny Tags, I never was thinking it was to build a business. It was very much the mom on the kitchen counter. We had moved out to California. It truly is about 18 years ago, almost 19 years ago. And I had been a CPA, never thought I'd quit my job to be a stay-at-home mom. But I did. We moved out west and I saw a woman wearing a hand-stamped piece of jewelry. And I said, I can figure out how to make that. So I ordered a bunch of stuff online. I have one of my favorite stories, but I got everything. I tried. I couldn't figure it out, threw it in the closet and gave up. And then I'll share real quick what happened. So 6 months later, though, I was getting on a plane. And one of my favorite things to remind all of us, I need it too sometimes when we want to look at our phones, is that everyone knows something that you don't. So look up, talk to people. So I sat next to a woman on the airplane and we started chit-chatting. And I said, well, what do you do for work? She said, I'm in jewelry design school. And I said, oh, funny, because I've been trying to figure out how to blacken the letters on a tag that I'm stamping. I can't figure it out. She said, oh my gosh, that's so easy. It's a chemical called liver of sulfur. Here's my business card. I work at a jewelry supply store in San Francisco. And 100% would not have started the business if I did not talk to her on the plane. And when I got back from my trip, I went right to the store. She was not working there that day, never got to thank her. And that is how it started. So really is amazing.
Synchronicity, isn't it, in business? I can pivotally look back at so many moments just like yours where you think, wow, if that didn't happen, then this didn't happen. It's right time, right place, and looking for those moments to recognize them for the importance that they are. Has that been your experience too?
Yes, I just think it's about looking up. I think when that happened, there wasn't even an iPhone. So what has happened now with my kids, every time, I'm just talk to people. So that's a whole other conversation.
And I'm so fascinated about the CPA background because, my experience with women who have a financial literacy background, especially CPA, is that they're usually not the risk takers, if you like, the ones who'll start their own businesses, or sometimes not necessarily the dreamers, if you like. But I'm so fascinated by the CPA background and what that's meant that your business has been really clever at that other businesses might not because of your background.
I think the CPA one, I like to say that accounting to me was a language of business. So I feel like it was my love of business and wanting to understand it that put me in the CPA route. And it was a little bit of a default. I was a philosophy major for undergrad, so didn't really have a lot of job offers. was working at a bank, and my dad said, you got to go back to school. You got to do something. And I started to go back at night school for my MBA, really liked accounting, and they had a program where you could get your MS in accounting. So that's what I did. And I loved accounting. I hated being an auditor and doing tax returns. So I quickly left once I got my CPA, went and got out of that, crunching numbers all day.
Yeah, the compliance side is probably a bit tedious and repetitive, but I have to say, like, the skills that you would have learnt in those pathways of education must have been so profoundly valuable for building your own business.
Yes, and I think I probably take it for granted because profit loss, balance sheet, deferring revenue, all of that and my husband's also a CPA. So it's a little bit of, I don't realize what an advantage it was in starting the business because it was second nature to me.
Yeah, one of the things I'm really aware of for a lot of our listeners is that financial literacy is definitely not the strength of the female crowd. And it's often because we don't have the business degrees or the experiences that gives us that skill set. And I think women, therefore, are less likely to go and, raise capital or even get debt funding. And definitely across the board here at our SheCom community, a lot of women don't know what a balance sheet is or even how to ascertain a profit and loss. So I applaud you for that exciting background. And I want to know, tell us the Tiny Tags story then. So we're back to, you've discovered a way to make the tags that works the way that you creatively had in mind. And how did you first kick it off?
Started hand stamping on my kitchen counter, very cliche, and everything was done. I made a bunch, then back to all my girlfriends back east. Would start getting phone calls, emails, and I started making them checks in the mail. And one of my favorite memories is I remember laying in bed with my husband and saying, could you imagine if I could make $250 a day, like how that would change our lives? Because at that time, my goal was to be able to pay for the groceries for the week, maybe be able to pay for a date night. My husband was putting food on the table. So, we were stretching his one paycheck. And so I started doing that. And I'm going to give you, because it's many years. And then we decided to move back east. And luckily for me, Rhode Island and Massachusetts have huge history of jewelry making. And I really did not enjoy making the jewelry. It was cumbersome. It was a huge, time waste in my mind. So luckily for me, there is manufacturers. So I decided, and at that time, Etsy had started to come up. So there was moms in the middle of nowhere making hand stamped jewelry for like $5. So probably like 14 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe 14, when we really said, okay, we're done with hand stamping, and we completely changed everything and went to fine laser engraved jewelry. So the jewelry you see now, so our jewelry is made in the same factory as Tiffany's, David Yurman, Rhode Island and Massachusetts have a huge history of jewelry making from like the late 1800s. And then the business literally grew very organically. It wasn't like we were out there buying meta ads and all that. Grew very organically. And there was definitely, pivots along the way that how the brand evolved, which to me has been the thing I love so much about Tiny Tags, is that I hope that we stand for something and we're not just selling jewelry.
Yeah, I love that. When I was researching your company today, I really love that ethos, and it became really obvious to me that the organic growth and then having the product in the right hands at the right moments, that synchronicity piece again, rather than using meta ads to grow quickly. But as you've pointed out, that isn't necessarily always the right approach for brands, especially when you lose money on the first order. That's not necessarily a clever acquisition strategy for new clients. So tell us a bit about the organic growth that's worked for Tiny Tags.
So the growth, I think, came from, there's a couple of pivotal things that happened. I think one of the first necklaces I ever made was for a mom, and this was all through email when I was still in California. My son was 5, her son was 5, and he had passed away. And we had gotten introduced because someone thought that she would like the necklace and introduced us. And her name was Reggie, her son was Aiden, and we became email friends. And that relationship changed me, because you can't read an email from a mom of an angel and not change you, and really cemented this incredible, every single day, this gratitude of just having a healthy child, because I would get her emails and I would sob reading them. And so much of the foundation of Tiny Tags was based on Reggie, based on how much love she had for Aiden. She went on to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for Teen Leukemia. And that was a really defining moment for what Tiny Tags became. And then at the same time, as I'm sure you've had in your journey, is everyone tells what you should do. So I was getting, oh, you got to make jewelry for this, you got to make jewelry for that, for brides, for graduates. And my head was spinning. And I listened to a book called Brand Warfare, and it was like light bulbs going off. And it was like, you have to be something, if you try to be everything to everybody, you're nobody. And I went home and I deleted everything off the website that did not have to do with mothers, because I knew that's what I cared about. And later on in life, I kind of unraveled why. And once I did that, it really helped run the business. And it was so much easier because I knew who we were talking to. I knew where she was hanging out. And I would say no. I would get invited to a bridal expo. I would say no. So that was really critical for me.
It's like knowing your lane. I think the more you know your lane and stick to it. And the bit that comes off the back of that I want to ask you about next is that community piece, because I think when you know your lane and your audience is tight, then you have a much greater chance of talking to them in a way that resonates and creates heart. And I read somewhere you talked about the team that you have inside Tiny Tags. There isn't a day that goes past as a business that you guys don't read a story that moves you to tears. And I think being really clear about the lane you're in and then building that heartfelt community in and amongst that. As you said, if you're everything to everyone, it's so much harder to build the community. Has that been your experience?
Yes, I think it's exhausting. I knew that I couldn't do the other markets because I knew what I cared about. And that was so much that he talks about in that book, is like, what do you really care about and what's your why? Simon Sinek, Know Your Why. That was another pivotal moment when I read that book. And I was in an entrepreneur group and his book had come out and was pretty popular then. And someone said to me, well, what's your why? And I said, because I love my kids. You know, I love celebrating the gift of children. And he said to me, well, there has to be more than that. And I said, well, that's my answer. If you don't like it, it is what it is. And he said to me, well, what was your relationship like with your mother? And then I started to cry. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this all coming full circle to my own mom and my relationship with her? And that became a whole other journey. I've shared on my website, I grew up with my dad. My mom struggled to show up. And I was like, oh my gosh, was it possible that there was this like little girl in me that was wanting to say to every mother out there, celebrate your children because they need to be celebrated. And kind of a way for me to kind of say to my own mother, you know, like, I would rather if you had showed up in your imperfect self than just not show up at all. And that's what I love about the business. And I think why I've always said, like, I'm not looking to sell it and go lay by a beach someday, is because I have grown so much with it. And, you know, as I'm going to soon be an empty nester, you know, I love talking about marriage and what that looks like and how that evolves. And I feel like as Tiny Tags has grown, I have grown. And all of the stories and all of the women and the men that I've connected with have shaped who I am today. So there's just such a sense of gratitude for the community. I mean, whether I have sent books to moms that were feeling down, DMing with moms about remembering what really matters, because I think the young moms, I'm so glad I didn't have social media raising my kids. The noise that is out there, and quite frankly, I think a lot of the nonsense they're being fed is just not healthy for anybody.
No, I completely agree with you. As a mom of a 14-year-old going on 22, it's a daily struggle to try and navigate the self-confidence and the anxiety that comes off the back of just too much exposure. But thanks for your vulnerable share. And I love the full circle for you on the why. That's just such an incredible piece of legacy, I guess, to be able to build something that deeply resonates with you and then deeply resonates with others. And chasing back to that original question around organic, I feel like your story and the very obvious big heart that you have inside of your chest and this love for this business being so much more than jewelry, that seems to be the foundation of what your organic growth has been too.
Yes. And I've said to my husband, even if it all ended tomorrow, you know, because I mean, it's not all rainbows and cupcakes, right? There's challenges in running a business. But I said, even if it all ended tomorrow, I'm just so thankful for the journey. And I've just been, and that's the one thing I try to talk to when I talk to younger founders or anyone, it's that there's such a rat race now, whether it's about raising money and selling. And, you know, my feed can get filled up with people doing $1 million in one day when they launch this product. And it's so easy to let that become the distraction. And for me, I always have to go back to, yeah, like we're not $100 million business, but I have been able to carve out this space of life that I've really enjoyed, and I've grown, and I love the business. I love our community, and that's good for me. And to remind yourself of that.
I think it's because women in general suffer from a significant dose of imposter syndrome, and we often feel like we should emulate other women's success. As you just said, there's so much emphasis for female founders of having the big cap raise or the big exit, and doesn't have to be for us. Something I'm a really big fan of is, choose your own version of success and don't necessarily equate it to anybody else's. And I love that you're really clear about the lane that you're in and then the speed at which you're going. It doesn't have to be a Ferrari at 150 kilometers an hour down the highway. It's your version of that. And it gives back, obviously, it sounds like a lot more than it takes from the world.
I hope so. And even when I convinced my husband to quit his job to join Tiny Tags, he grew up upstate New York. His parents had the same job for 40 years. You don't quit your job. But he was miserable commuting into Boston every day. And I said, I want you to live your dream. So, let's take a risk and you quit your job, join Tiny Tags so you can coach and do the things that you love. And when he was like, I can't do that. And I was like, I would rather sell our house. And I was like, what more do you want? Like a faster car? Just kind of like, let's go back to why we're here. We're here for such a little time. And it's like, for me, I want to spend time with people I love. I want to make the world a better place. I want to spend time with my family, my friends. And I don't need more stuff in my life. And I think with social media, the consumption is, I think, at an all-time high, it seems.
Oh, definitely agree with that. So what are your best tips for our beautiful listeners with regards to work-life balance? It sounds like choosing what your lane and speed is first. And then what else have you learned around trying to keep that balance?
I mean, I can only speak to my journey. I know there are some businesses that you have to raise money, right? They're very capital intensive, whether there's consumer goods or what have you. So I can only speak to, for me, that it has been, I would have gone back to my CPA job at some point after the boys were in school. And if I would have started a business, which I think I would have, I grew up in an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur. It was definitely in my blood, is to do it at night. And when I was raising the boys, I worked at night and weekends, and I prioritized building the business and not cleaning the house and doing the laundry. Those are the things that just, I did them, but my house wasn't a palace, and I was okay with that. So my downtime was building on the business. It wasn't about going shopping or getting my nails done, not to be very cliche about women, but that was how I spent my downtime when I had young kids, was building the business. That's what I cared about. And so, for me, what worked for me was start small and realize that there's little pivots here and there, and not to take all your savings and go in crazy debt. I mean, I was lucky with Tiny Tags that it was when I was hand stamping, I was doing all the work. So I did all the customer service. I did everything for many years.
And as your business model attests to, you're generally getting paid up front for a product that gets produced afterwards, which definitely helps with cash flow. But I think that for a lot of women, not even knowing if they're profitable or not knowing at what point they can pay themselves would be a big barrier to finding that kind of peace. I know for me, Melissa, half of my problems are the monster under the bed. If you think there's a monster under the bed because you're not all over your numbers, then in actual fact, you can keep yourself sleepless in Seattle worrying about cash flow when in actual fact, it's not as bad as you think it is. So I would have to say I'm a little jealous of you with your CPA background. Numbers are not my strength. And fortunately at SheCon, we have a bunch of people whose numbers are their strength. So I'm now on top of it. But for a lot of women, I would have to say worrying about money would be at the top of the list of things that stops us from being more successful in life.
Absolutely. And I would attest to that. That's definitely true. One thing that I've always done, though, also is I've always tried to get a mentor. I have DM'd anybody that I think can help me. And maybe they won't be your mentor for 6 months, but maybe they'll give you 15 minutes. Maybe they'll introduce you to someone. So when I haven't known the answer is trying to find people that do. And the one thing I do know about women, it's like, maybe you're not good at numbers, but maybe your girlfriend is, and she's willing to help you.
Yeah, the hand up or down the ladder, so important. Both we have that here at SheCon where so many amazing women show up to help mentor our clients for that exact reason that they want to put their hand down the ladder and say, who else can I help up a couple of rungs? But my journey, like yours, when I was building my Eco Originals, my nappy/diaper brand, was exactly the same. If I couldn't solve a problem in my own brand, I would go to someone who'd solved it. And 15 minutes to, well, often you asked for 15 minutes and got an hour because they were wonderful and you got chatting on a topic that both sides were excited and passionate about, but often not paid, just somebody helping somebody. And there's not enough of that in life. I think people don't think to ask. What's been one of your best mentors or people you've reached out to that have said yes to give you some time?
She's still my mentor. Her name is Kim Krusenberg. She worked at Goop, and I reached out to her when she was still at Goop. They were doing an opening in the Hamptons, and I wanted to get us there. And then she has stayed on so for probably like 5 years. And we talk about once a month, and she's just always so gracious, always willing to help and introduce people. So, and I'm always saying, like, if I've talked to a woman the other day and was saying, okay, I read this book, I talked to this person, and always just trying to knowledge share. Yeah. But I also feel like I also don't want to make it all roses, because there are times when I say, oh, gee, we could have been $100 million business if I did X, Y, and Z. So I'm victim like everyone else, where you kind of like, oh, I wish. But I feel like I'm pretty good at bringing myself back to I have, versus whenever I find myself saying I want, I say I have.
That's such a beautiful reframe. So I want our listeners to like pay close attention to this. I think it's easy, as you've just mentioned, social media, and I certainly am a Libran star sign and I like pretty and beautiful things, and I'm pretty good at I want. I think it's a really nice reminder to all of us that most of us already have enough in our lives, and finding gratitude daily and some sense of peace in that might allow us to feel more balanced in our approach with our businesses. I love that reframe, Melissa.
Yeah, I love it.
So let's talk then about cap raise versus self-funding, because you've famously chosen not to raise capital, and I'm imagining you're quite debt adverse and have used your own revenue streams to grow. But I know that, let's talk about Target. I know in 2017 you got an offer that you turned down, but in 2022 you did partner with them, and I gather, looking from the outside in, that it's been really successful, but I'm sure it was with a lot of hiccups and had its moments. Talk us through what that looked like for a brand that was largely cash flow positive and D2C to suddenly go into major retailers.
I was really concerned. I mean, there's so many things. One, it was the cash flow. You don't get paid out till 75 days. It was the brand. You know, we were selling 14 karat gold, $1,000 pieces. Our average order value on our website's about $250. So here we are doing fine jewelry, and now we're going to sell a $25 piece in Target. And the way it went down is Target reached out to me in 2017. The buyer happened to follow me on social media, and we had a great chat. And I said, I just don't think I can handle Target right now, to be honest. And we said, let's stay in touch. And then we started talking again in 2022, and we did 200 stores in 23, I believe it was. And I was like, we'll be one and done. Like Lily Pulitzer, we'll be cool and trendy. And then we crushed it, thanks to my amazing team from a social media standpoint. We had so much fun with it, and never mind, the pieces were adorable. And then Target said, will you come back? And I was really concerned so much for the brand, because to me, I just was afraid people would think that our website stuff was not fine personalized jewelry. So truth be told, I went back to my mission, and the mission of Tiny Tags is to celebrate the gift of a child and every mother's unique journey of motherhood. And I said to my husband, the word exclusivity was never in that mission statement. And if we could bring the message of joy and gratitude to a bigger audience, then I want to do it. And from where our relationship with Target has been amazing, we have consultants, JMC, that are incredible, that kind of handhold us. And it's been, we went from 200 stores to 400, and then we were supposed to go to 800, and then we went to all 1,675, which is wild. And from a cash flow, I know, so my husband, who is our CFO, we did a line of credit to extend for the first. And now it's sort of like, you paid, and then you got to pay your manufacturer. So now it's kind of this revolving door. But we got a simple line of credit that our bank helped us get. So, but it was, it's still I mean, dealing with Target's a massive beast. We have in-store merchandising. We'll go to some stores, it looks amazing. Sometimes it doesn't. And I'm in the back trying to find the signage. I'm rearranging everything. But for the most part, I feel like it's been, I hope from a brand awareness, it completely elevates us. And then, I mean, I love Kendra Scott. I always think rising tides lift all boats. And, when she got into Target, I'm a huge fan of hers. I felt like, okay, like now Target's jewelry section is like a destination place and like Little Words Project. And I love that there's 3 female founders side by side that Target has supported. So it's pretty cool.
So I completely agree. What an opportunity. And I love that you brought that back to your brand purpose and mission. And I think that's such an important, and when you know your lane and your speed, and then I think the next lever is like know your why and stick to it and make decisions from that space. I see a lot of women making decisions from a place of ego, for example. And I think what you did is such a remarkable decision of like, well, why are we here? And how do we reach more women with that message? Well, we do something like a Target. So if we look back on it now, and I'm assuming you're still in Target and this is an ongoing piece now for your brand, what are like maybe 2 things that haven't been great, and then maybe 2 things that have been unexpected silver linings? Like talk us through a few more things that we might not consider for brands that are looking at something like this.
I think that is something we're still keeping our eye on and making sure that, when we launch a new collection in Target, we really have like an army of influencers and we love them talking about it versus necessarily on all our channels. And then the other negative I would probably say is, I mean, for the protecting the brand, I think, and the jury's still out on that, right? I mean, I don't know. And I think the great thing is that I feel like Target has just been amazing. For Women's Founder Month in March, we're having a special piece, and the copy that we did, because every piece has copy on it, I thought was so beautiful. And I'm just so excited that we get to put these really feel good pieces out to the world. And I love when I get the DMs from moms. I get DMs because we'll discontinue a piece and they want to give one to their daughter, and I'll go rummaging in my closet trying to find an old sample, and I'll just mail it to her. So it just created a bigger community, and that's an incredible opportunity. But I mean, I also look at it that Target will probably go away someday. So I'm also not naive to, right now it's amazing, but it could end, and to make sure that my business is sound so that we haven't built up an infrastructure within the business that if we lose Target, that we're kind of overstaffed.
Let me guess, you've built a successful brand, but now you're feeling stretched, stuck, and unsure how to scale to the next level. I see it all the time. The truth is, what got you here won't get you there. That's where SheCom's Scale Mastermind program comes in. We've helped so many women grow from 6 to multiple 6 and even 7 figures without sacrificing their sanity. If you're ready for real strategic support and to be surrounded by women who truly get it, come join us. You don't have to figure this out alone. Head to shecom.co and take that next step. And that, of course, is always the hard thing for a small team, is you take your eye off the ball because there's a ball that's louder and bigger, and then the D2C can suffer. So I think it sounds like you're aware of it. And I would say to our listeners that it's a challenge because there are always 12 eggs that shouldn't all be in one basket, as you've mentioned. They should be in 12 different baskets. And that is time consuming. It's energy heavy. It's exhausting and relentless to be thinking all the time, how do I make sure that they're all okay and afloat, and difficult to sometimes navigate. And as you've said, making sure that we stay true to the thing that we own, which is our own D2C website always, because we control the narrative there, but we don't always control it in our retail partnerships. So do you think that Tiny Tags might consider another retail partnership, or this feels like the one for now?
Well, no, I was going to say the other positive is that it has, when you can show that you have launched in Target and you've done it well, then other retailers are looking to you like, oh, okay, you can handle us. So we are, ironically, the Paper Store, which is about 130 chain up the East Coast in Chicago, and also located in my hometown. So we're talking with them. And I love the idea that we're creating collections for different retail partners. and really talking to their community, talking to their price point. And I love that because I think it just hopefully elevates the brand. And I understand like there's amazing brands out there and like boutiques that you would go in and you would spend $65 on a necklace. And I love that we can design into those price points.
Have you noticed any, and obviously, just Target at this point, but I love the strategy of going into more stores where people might be purchasing gifts, but have you found any sway back to your D2C website from, say, a client that might find you for the first time in Target and then come back and buy more pieces from you on your website?
That's always the hope. We haven't had a great way to measure it yet. But that is the hope. So even, these army of influencers that that support us in every Target launch, we always give them a personalized piece. So when they're sharing, they're showing the tiny tags layered with the Target collection, and they do layer beautifully. So they definitely complement each other. But I also get it. I wouldn't spend 100, like our website is 200, 250. I wouldn't buy my kid's teacher a $250 necklace, but I would buy her a cute little $25 piece at Target. So I love that we're able to be there for all these gifting moments.
Yeah, they're like two different things. I was on your website this morning and I was already trying to work out how I could order a piece with my daughter's name on it. I love that so much. It's a very heartfelt thing to do. So let's talk about the army of influencers for a moment and turn our attention over to influencers and publicity, because I know you've been featured in Oprah, People Magazine, Goop, and even Meryl Streep. I read a really cute story about how you got a necklace on Meryl Streep. But talk to us a little bit about those really important pieces in your journey and how you've maybe been clever enough to leverage some of them.
So press, I've always been a huge fan of press. PR firms are always challenging. I think any entrepreneur that hires a PR firm will say the same thing. I think I've talked to one person that was like, I love my PR firm. And for me early on, when Instagram was still new, and one of the best placements we ever got was People Magazine. And I had DM'd the editor. Her name was Kate Coy, I believe is how you said her last name. And I just DM'd her. I sent her a piece. And she didn't even tell me. And a friend snapped a picture, and there we were in the Mother's Day gift guide in the print of People Magazine. So back now, I think editors are all becoming influencers. But back then, it was a lot easier. And then same with like Selma Blair wearing us. That was all through DMs. They, I think, actually read their DMs back then. And then Meryl Streep was speaking at an event here, and I just hounded the people that were organizing it. And I said, what are you going to possibly give her that she'd care about? And we made her a gorgeous 14-karat gold necklace. She's got 4 kids. Most people don't know that, with all of her kids' names on it. And she literally put it right on. And that was definitely a run around the kitchen moment for sure. And even now, I mean, the Copel sisters, they're here. They're from Rhode Island. So like I DM them. I'm always DMing, wanting to share. And I mean, we've gotten comments before, why are you giving product to people that can have all this money, they can afford it? But the reality is celebrities wearing your product is a game changer. I mean, look at Taylor Swift got engaged today. I've talked to a brand, they like quadrupled because she was using one of their products. And you can't deny the celebrity effect.
It's the circle of influence they have. I agree with you. You know, the bigger the circle of influence, the more likely more people will find your brand for the first time. It is powerful. And I love that you shared that, here in Australia for our Australian audience. I would also 1000% agree. You've met one person more than me that loves publicity firms. I don't know if I've got any, including myself, who've tried like 3 times and it has just never successfully worked. But I think that, I might even be so bold as to call it guerrilla style marketing. It's getting on the tools yourself. It's sending product to the right people. It's getting in DMs. It's, tracking down someone's assistant or an address or showing up at an event prepared and ready. It's clever. It's bold though. And a lot of women feel perhaps shy and unable to do that. Like, what would your advice be to them? Because it's clearly worked for you.
That you have nothing to lose. I mean, you really don't. I have definitely put myself out there for just embarrass myself, and I feel like I have nothing to lose. I paid to meet Oprah. She had a Live Your Best Life tour years ago, and I'm not a spa girl. I'm not a girl's getaway girl. And the ticket was a lot of money. And my husband said, Missy, if you can meet Oprah, this is money well spent. So I bought the VIP ticket. I fell into her arms crying, made her, of course, the necklace. But because I was sobbing, her assistant handed the tissue to me and then took the necklace. But at the same event, Gail King was there. I went right up to Gail King. Hey, I made you this necklace. So I'm pretty relentless about trying to get my product in the right people's hands and I also believe in it. Like, I actually feel like you will love this necklace if I give it to you. I mean, the one I gave Oprah was so beautiful. And so when you love your product so much, it almost makes it easier because you think their life is better with it. So
the other thing I occasionally see is amazing women who do perhaps a little bit more organically than that, get their product in the hands of really famous people, but they don't leverage it. So talk to us about the leverage. So say Meryl Streep, for example, or Oprah or Gail, wearing a piece of your jewelry. Where do you immediately push that out everywhere? And how do you leverage to make your brand get the golden glow from the people wearing it?
yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's a pretty crowded place out there right now from a content standpoint. I have an amazing marketing manager who's 27, which keeps us trendy. And she knows, I mean, there was that Taylor Swift Russ thing. I was like, what's on our Instagram today? So it's hard. And to be completely frank, I don't know if we have cracked it. I think I see other brands that are cracking it better than we are. Sometimes I do feel like I'm like the suburban business owner out in my own, like I'm not in New York or LA, so I'm not as trendy, but again, I'm pretty content where I am. I do know if we ever have a piece of press, we'd obviously throw it on social, TikTok. My marketing manager's done an amazing job on TikTok, on email. So it is like, or Google, or Meta, and it is just that spider web that you're just trying to get into everyone's hands to make you look like you're cool. And that's the thing. I do think with TikTok, I was saying to a woman the other day, TikTok and the virality of TikTok goes against like every business book, right? Like you would never go into an MBA and the whole focus is to try to make something go viral to grow your business. So to chase virality, which I get, there's a reason why, and we are always trying to create content that could go viral, but I don't drive myself crazy trying to be the most trendiest brand out there, because I do feel like we are a little bit more of that thoughtful brand. And we've been around for a while where, we've all seen the brands that go viral overnight and they're doing $100 million and yay to them. I just don't think that'll ever be us.
I think it comes back to that lane and the speed and the why, though, doesn't it? Because I'm with you. I'm 47 this year and I definitely am not cool, but I've just hired a 21-year-old content producer and love her. She's incredible. But she's started getting me to do some stuff lately that when I review it over the last month, I realize it probably isn't exactly aligned with my why. It feels a little bit like we're trying to trend on TikTok and it maybe feels a little bit disingenuous. So I'm with you. I think, we often talk about instead of 10,000 people seeing a TikTok, if you only have 200 people see it, but they're your perfect avatar, that's more valuable for you as a business than 10,000 people who will never buy from you. And so it's easy to chase virility and perhaps coolness, but it doesn't always align with your brand's why, but it doesn't even always align with sales. I actually had a TikTok that did go viral in the last month, and it was me reviewing a food truck, a Venezuelan street food truck. And it was great content and it was fun and edgy, but those 20,000 people that have watched it, they're probably not my audience. So it's easy
Right.
to get distracted with the concept of virility as opposed to staying true to our why. Has that been your experience?
Yes, and I definitely, though, do feel pressure as a founder now to be on social media. And I can 100%, if I didn't have a business, I would not be on social media. I just wouldn't be. And I feel pressure because, AI cannot duplicate a founder story. So I feel, and I'm putting pressure. I actually said to myself, I'm going to give myself 1 year and I'm really going to put myself out there because it is a very vulnerable. And I also struggle because I'm constantly saying to my kids, get off your phone, get off social media. It's nonsense. And they're seeing me talking into my phone. And that seems crazy to me. So like yourself, though, I'm hoping to hire a girl tomorrow who can help me do my social media, because what I do think is entertaining, and I understand it's about entertainment, is that I look at myself as a big sister now to a lot of our community. And there are, not that I ever want to give advice, because internally we always joke about, you know what you should do? I don't want to tell anyone what to do. All I want to do is I can share my experience and the things that I think have worked for me and things that haven't worked for me and have fun with it. So I understand the pressure as founders to have your personal brand out there on social media. But I think it's important to find a way that feels real to you. It was funny. My son, I was talking into my phone, doing something, and he looked over me. He's like, "That is not what you look like, Mom," because I had a filter on. And then I was like, oh no, he's seeing me fall to the trap of throwing on a filter. So anyway.
Oh, it's a complex topic. And, I have a 14-and-a-half-year-old daughter I'm raising, and it's so tricky. I have exactly the same thing happening in my home with my husband and my daughter, who are like, there goes Mum. They call me Thumbs because I'm always on my phone. And equally, I'm saying to my daughter, get off your phone. Stop playing Roblox with your friends. Like, enough technology. And I'm like, bang, 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 bang on my phone.
I know.
So hard as a parent and I say, but I'm working. And she's like, well, I'm talking to my school friends, like she's justifying her behavior against mine. It's so tricky to navigate.
I know. My husband reads the Wall Street Journal on his phone in the morning. And I said, I just want to order the paper because I want my kids to come down and see you reading a paper, not on your phone, because their perception, which is reality, is that you're always on your phone, even though you're reading the Wall Street Journal.
It makes it really hard as parents to say, get off your phone then, doesn't it? I will say, though, the founder piece will speak to a lot of our listeners, this concept of being the face of our brands or somewhat a face of our brand. And I am 1000% think we need to be as founders because people like people. And if your brand doesn't have a face and a story, it's less likely to be memorable. So I know we need to show up, but I also can't help thinking it's one of the hardest things to do. I have 2 podcasts this morning to record, and then I've got my content producer here for the day, and she's going to want to crank 15 different videos out, and I have 4 different outfits hanging on the wall. And I think, like the very last thing I want to do today is that, because there's a million other things that my business needs of me today that I would gladly sink myself into over content creation. However, we have to do it, right? Like, it's so tricky to navigate. It's easy to fall by the wayside.
I 100% believe you have to. I got a book. I went to California and I went to Malibu Farms, this beautiful restaurant that's on the pier. And without ever thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I'm sure some very, very wealthy woman started, or couple started this restaurant. And I happened to buy the recipe book because I have new bookshelves. When I got home, I read the inside fold of her story. And I was so blown away, made me fall in love with her. It was not at all what I had presumed, so shame on me. And I was like, I got to DM her, and I want to work with her now. The hotel I stayed at in North Carolina, I stayed at because I listened to the How I Built This on it for the Graduate Hotel. So 100% the story matters, especially in this incredibly crowded marketplace that we are in. People want to buy from people that they actually think care. And that's the one thing I know I have going for me, is I actually really, really care.
Yeah, that heart on the sleeve, it's really valuable. I'm with you too. And it's easy sometimes for me to get excited about a new car or something that I want, not something that I need. Sorry, Melissa.
Right.
But it's got to coming back.
No shame.
Coming back to our why is so important. So we're almost out of time on the potty. So I want to finish with one really important question for you, which is, if you looked back over everything that you've built so far, and if you could travel back in time, what's one thing that you might say to yourself now as a piece of advice for back then when you're starting out?
Dream bigger. 100%. I mean, I literally can still remember saying, if I can make $250 a day, could you imagine? And now to think that we're a team of 10 people, my husband joined Tiny Tags, and we're in 1,600 targets, that I just can't believe it. And I wish I had dreamt bigger, because if I did, I think we were so early on in the game on D2C. We probably could have really put a bigger stake in the ground, but that's it. Dream bigger.
That's the story we all have, though, isn't it? It's the journey that we've lived in this life, but I love the dream bigger. I probably the contrary part of what you're doing is I'm doing the opposite, which is I'm all in, and that takes some significant balls, and it definitely keeps me sleepless sometimes. So mine might be slow down and breathe, Lisa. Oh, thanks for joining us on the podcast today, Melissa, and to our beautiful listeners. If you've loved this episode, whether you're on Apple or Spotify, make sure you hit that follow button so you get notified of our next episode of She Talks. And if you loved something about what Melissa and I talked about today, jump over to my DMs on Instagram, LisaJones_co, and drop me a DM. I want to know what resonated with you today. Thank you so much, Melissa. I hope to see you in New York soon for a proper hug in person.
I love it. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of She Talks. I hope today's conversation sparked ideas, gave you strategies you can put into action, and reminded you that you're never alone on this journey. If you loved this episode, head over to shecom.co for today's show notes, exclusive freebies, and special offers from our sponsors. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss a future episode. Until next time, keep showing up, keep building, and most importantly, keep talking.